Welcome to Mom and Mind, where we dive into all aspects of perinatal mental health and wellness related to pregnancy, birth, loss, postpartum, and new parenthood. It's so much more than postpartum depression. We raise the volume on all of these topics in the hopes that someday everyone will have the support and info that they deserve before they need it. Please note this podcast is not a replacement for treatment by a professional or professional training. Welcome back. I'm Dr. Kat. In this episode, we are going to be talking about some of the factors that impact us as mothers and our transition to motherhood without us even knowing it sometimes. We're going to be talking with Clancy, who's a licensed marriage and family therapist, about what happens for moms who, in their transition to motherhood, are having difficulties because of their relationships with their own mothers. We're going to get into some details about what happens when you're becoming a mom and your own mother was either emotionally abusive or very difficult. What happens when you come up against these ideas of motherhood, when you've had those types of experiences and you're trying to figure out how you want to be as a mother and how to cope and set boundaries if the relationship with your own mother is still ongoing or the issues are still ongoing. And very importantly, how you can build up your sense of self and your own idea of what motherhood looks like for you. Crystal is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a private practice that specializes in perinatal mental health. She is one of the founding members of Pregnancy and Postpartum Support Minnesota, which is the Minnesota state chapter of Postpartum Support International. She's been a PSI State Coordinator for 5 years. She's married with 2 kids who are 15 and 12. She's coming on to share her expertise with us today. I'm Dr. Kat, host of the Mom and Mind podcast, where we cover everything related to your mental wellness in pregnancy, loss, birth, and postpartum. It's more than just postpartum depression. I interview experts in the field, and we get to hear real stories of healing from courageous moms and dads. We know that you are not alone on this journey, and now you can know that too. Listen in to Mom and Mind wherever you listen to podcasts, on the Pod Network, or at momandmind.com. Welcome, Crystal. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm really happy to hear from you today because a lot of the people who are listening, I think, will be able to identify with what we're discussing, which is essentially as a mom who's now mothering yourself, if you had a difficult relationship with your own mother, what might be playing out? And I'm just really excited to share this viewpoint and this information with our listeners because I think it will be really valuable for them in their own healing. So wherever you'd like to start, please go ahead and start on that.
Okay. Well, this topic interested me originally as a personal topic because I did have a difficult or do have a difficult relationship with my own mother. And it really came into play becoming a mom, but even more so when I had a daughter. My first child was a boy, and then I had a girl 2.5 years after that and had postpartum depression, which I did not have after the birth of my son. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I've analyzed this a lot about what the factors were, but one of the things was definitely that gender connection between the difference between having a girl versus a boy and the fears that then ended up being projected or being drawn out because of my own relationship with my mom. Yeah, so then this has led to me noticing in my practice, because I work with this population, started noticing over time that this is a really common theme, not always about gender, but sometimes, but definitely for those who have had a difficult mom. So maybe emotionally abusive, maybe personality disordered, maybe really disconnected. And so it just really has had an impact on these moms.
Right. I mean, I'm just thinking of how many people this could apply to and in so many different ways. I'm sure having a difficult relationship with either parent, but really specifically as a mother, becoming a mother, and then, all the examples of motherhood that you've had from a difficult relationship would be really hard to wade through.
Right. And not to get us off topic, but it could also be then applied to, I've also seen this with fathers who have had a difficult relationship with their own father or lack of a stable mother figure in their life. So definitely a lot of the things we'll talk about today are things that could be taken and applied to those relationships as well.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So how can we kind of set this up for people who are wanting to understand if they kind of fit in this situation? Can you explain a little bit about what having a difficult mother might look like?
Sure. Well, that's a really big question.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. But typically when I talk about it, it's even just having people think back about their own relationship with their mom and asking about how their emotional needs were met in their family or not met can be just a really general talking point with clients, but also you can then get into some typical characteristics about when you did try to connect emotionally, what happened. Sometimes there's a great checklist. There's a book by Karyl McBride that has a checklist she talks mostly about narcissistic mothers, but so things like, was your mom cold? Was she detached? Did she project her own issues onto you? A lot of people will talk about that one-upping or flipping it back onto you, flipping the blame back on you, lack of accountability. So just again, that their own needs center around themselves so that the needs of the child are not being met by the mother.
Mm-hmm. Okay, right. That's a really good backdrop, for me and for people who are listening to be thinking about what a new mother who's coming into, her own motherhood experience might have dealt with in that situation. Yeah. Can you speak to, I guess, talk a little bit more about becoming a mom when and if you did have that experience with your own mother?
It's not uncommon for moms to not realize this during pregnancy. It really just depends on their level of awareness of it before becoming a mom. Sure. There are definitely some women who may say, I never planned to have children because I didn't think that I would be a good mom. But a lot of them really, the level of abuse or lack of emotional connection isn't always so obvious. So it often does not come out until after they have the baby or during pregnancy. Then they start to realize, wow, I have no idea. Well, none of us knows what we're doing, right? But, but I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to emotional connection. Or sometimes they go to the far other extreme as well, where they're overly anxious and overly anxiously attached as well, because they just did not learn what that happy medium, that healthy level of attachment looks like.
Wow. Yeah. When you were describing that in my mind, I was kind of envisioning that playing out between like a newborn and a mom and a baby who's crying, and like what kind of just stress that might bring up if you are somebody who wasn't really taught how to attend to emotional stuff. Right. Like what kind of stress would that bring up for, not that you wouldn't be able to attend to a crying child, but just internally what happens to you if you feel like you're not sure what to do.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of times, again, it can really go a bunch of different ways, from I have no idea what I'm doing to I don't know how to meet this baby's needs, to going overboard, but then also going to the other extreme of completely detaching. Detaching, because you really don't know what to do. And so sometimes it's also comes out as anger. Why is this baby doing this to me? Or kind of personalizing their behavior. That, they just really hate me, or, things that again are just not even logically possible developmentally, but making it again about their own needs and their own emotions. So, but a lot of times it's more fear-based. It's more this, oh my gosh, I have no idea. Why am I taking care of this baby? How am I going to do this?
Yeah, there's already so much of that in motherhood. And then to have that additional layer of that, and I imagine it feeling so much more deep and so much more kind of disorienting. I don't know if that's the right word.
I think so. And I think just kind of when I talk with moms about their reproductive narrative of, how does that fit with what you told yourself about having children, or in what you tell yourself now? And a lot of times they envisioned, again, this is very common just in general, but these moms tend to struggle. Their reproductive narrative may have been that they hadn't even realized that this was going to be a problem. And afterward, finding that they can't connect on an emotional level with their baby.
Right. And how distressing that is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what can moms do about this? What does it look like?
I think if they want to try to take this on themselves, it'll be harder. But so there's always that finding a professional route. But if they do want to try to work through this on their own, I think it's asking themselves who they may have in their village that is a safe person to talk about these things with, someone in their life who does validate their emotions and reassure them that you did have a difficult mom, and I can see why this is hard for you, and letting them know that you can learn these things. You can learn how to try to connect in a better way with your baby. And it's easy in our heads as moms to fast forward to my daughter's going to be living on the streets because I didn't parent her correctly. And so having that safe person. So the hard part may be identifying that person as well. So if you don't necessarily have a friend or even a family, a sibling sometimes that seems to recognize that, community church, sometimes it's church for people, sometimes it's coworkers. If you don't have that person, that's when it can be really helpful to seek out a professional who has an understanding with these types of topics.
Right. So I'm kind of imagining a mom who's maybe even listening right now, who's realizing that, oh my gosh, yeah, I did have a difficult relationship with my own mother. Some of the things that these ladies are talking about are really resonating. And I think, probably a lot of children who have parents who they had difficult relationships with tend to blame themselves anyways. And then here we are in motherhood where we blame ourselves anyways. And so, right, a lot of kind of self-blame or, I don't know, embarrassment.
Shame.
Is embarrassment shame? Sure.
Yeah, all of that. Because, again, it really just depends on their story. And that's a big part with therapy or just supporting anybody if you run a support group or whatever, is that you get their own narrative about that. Because, in my own situation, my part of my shame was that I didn't feel this way towards my son, but I did towards my daughter. And so really just believing there was something wrong with me, that I couldn't do that. And other people, it may not be that. So we have to be careful also to not put our own stuff onto the other person, but just asking, what is that like for them? It may be their first child, it may be their fifth, and just kind of talking through that with them as well.
Okay, right. So when people are, women in particular here are trying to navigate their own ideas of motherhood or experience through motherhood while also simultaneously trying to understand their relationship with their own mom and how it's impacting them. And that can be pretty difficult, pretty challenging.
Yeah, it's very difficult. And it's also typically with these moms who then don't have a healthy mom. If they do have that mom in their life still, they're not only dealing with their own internal struggle with their child, with their baby, but then they're also dealing with what they believed their own mother might be like as a grandmother. So there's this ambiguous loss that comes out about, wow, there's so many layers of what I did not expect this to be like. And typically, the mom's mom is not capable, again, of meeting that emotional need. So not only are they struggling with how they feel about being the mom to this baby, but they're struggling about not getting what they were hoping for from their own mother.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so much to navigate all at once.
It is.
That's really,
it's
really
a 5-hour podcast.
I know, right? Yeah. That's so overwhelming. I just sort of envision feeling unsettled and ungrounded kind of in that experience, both trying to just sort of in the middle of trying to navigate these relationships that are important, even if they are difficult or were challenging, they have some impact in your life and you can't just flip a switch and kind of be done with your own history while you're trying to connect to your new baby.
Right. And I think even not just therapists who work with this population, but even friends or family members or whatever, it's hard. It's so easy to jump in and want to rescue and, push them and just, why don't you just cut off contact with your mom? Or why don't you do this? And you can't. A lot of times that is recipe for kind of making them retreat back into their cave of denial sometimes, or So it's just really important to try to sit back yourself and let them go at their own pace.
That's such an important point. Again, in and amongst all of the random advice that you're getting from everyone just about being a mom, then if you're trying to navigate this really challenging experience and people are also giving you really just shorthand advice, how much more difficult that would be to wade through it might feel conflicting. Like, I'm sure there are some feelings of, that would be nice to just like cut this out, but I can't just do that.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes it's not even the best thing, so again, you have to just really take it situation by situation and help them find what works for them. But it's definitely something that if there's still that level of they're not quite seeing it, of taking it really slowly.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm imagining too, for the new mom, if she's dealing with depression or anxiety on top of all of this, how much more difficult that would be and how much, I guess, more easy things would need to be taken.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you see that it's more common to have depression and anxiety when there's been a history of more challenging relationships with a mother?
It's hard to know what's chicken or egg, because when I see clients in my practice, that they're already there for depression or anxiety, and then this just surfaces as an additional issue. But typically, I think I would assume, or not assume even, but I think it's a good theory to believe that that would be the case of that depression or anxiety coming along with that, because again, there's so much shame and guilt and all of those emotions, and often a lack of quality support from who they thought they may get support from. And then that fuels that self-talk as well. So definitely beliefs about depression or anxiety, whether that's feeling hopeless or helpless versus more the worry, how am I going to parent this child? Or I shouldn't have had this baby, or kind of things like that.
So if there's somebody who's actively kind of dealing with this transition into motherhood with all of that we just talked about, and they still have a relationship with their mother that they had a difficult relationship with, are you typically helping people to do? Like, how do they cope with this?
Big question. I definitely have them be part of that decision, because there are times where it's not appropriate to cut mom out completely. And there's times where it may be so toxic that maybe we talk about it as taking a break, but it's really not my job as the therapist to tell them what that relationship should look like. So really, we tend to talk more about what would their goal be with this relationship, and what's doable, what's not doable, and then also boundary setting. So things like just trying to find really concrete things that either they can set or say with their mom. So for example, if their mom's expectation is that you call her every day, but yet really you're postpartum and maybe depressed, you're really not in the space to meet your mom's need, of how can we role play that conversation of saying, Mom, I really just cannot call you every day, but I can call you twice a week, and being okay with that. Or sometimes it's more just about scripting the role-playing piece of how can you respond to mom if she starts to be angry or projecting onto you or not respecting your boundaries. How can you talk through that yourself? And also, what are some kind of scripted responses that you can say back to mom? So giving them those tools, because they never learned that in childhood. The message they got was that their job was to take care of mom's feelings, and their job was to, if their feelings were ever important, they were being selfish. So their self-talk is all about, but my needs don't matter. So it's literally rewiring of that self-talk of your needs do matter. How can you voice that to your mom? But also a lot of education about that there are going to be limits. Mom is not going to suddenly wake up and say, you're right, I've been so selfish and I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. So this is work that takes a very, very long time.
Sure.
And that And that even reality check about the end result is that you're never going to get to a place where you feel good about this, where you feel happy. There's always that grief of that you did not get the kind of mom that you deserved, and that it's okay to be upset about that. It's okay to be sad about that, that just because you get frustrated with your mom or slip and say something that she's not going to respond well to, that's totally human and it's going to happen.
Right. So, there's kind of, I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but it's almost like a remothering of yourself that you have to do.
Totally. That's very accurate. Giving to yourself what you didn't get from your parent.
Wow. Yeah, that's really powerful and extremely hard because of the dynamic that you just said. If you were sort of trained and taught that, if nothing else, they're secondary, but maybe even farther down the list, and somebody else's needs are always more important than yours, even like wrapping your head around setting a boundary would be really hard.
Yeah. It is. And that's why it's very important for anyone listening to know that even if you get better at this and setting these boundaries and accept that this is what it is and this is the way your relationship is going to be, doesn't mean that you don't ever have feelings about that. And, I'll tell clients in my own, I don't always self-disclose, but I'll say something like, I've been in a better place with this for 15 years. And I still have moments where I get really angry or I engage with her when I know I shouldn't, or, again, we're human. And even if logically we know that it's never going to be healthy, it doesn't mean that emotionally we don't wish for that.
Isn't that amazing how long we hold on to that desire for connection?
Yeah.
Like this is from, we are born, right? We're born ready to connect. And wow, just, the time span that we are, and really, I'm thinking of several different clients in my practice right now who are struggling with this very thing that you're describing, is that the need is still so strong to want to have that connection with your mother or father, in some cases or whatever, but that's years. Women, let's just say who've been, they're 35 years old and have always wanted that from their mom, and to have to really learn that that's not going to happen necessarily the way that you have been wanting it to for that long.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really, really hard.
It is.
Yeah.
It's hard and freeing all at the same time, because if you can accept as yourself, if you can accept that this is because they are just not capable of giving that to you, you're able to take that and say, and that's not about me. That's not because I did something wrong or because I wasn't lovable or because I was a difficult baby or any of those things.
Right, which might have been the things you were told or made to feel along
or
the
told
way.
Yourself, because again, again, a whole separate podcast, but kids, if kids aren't explained things, they fill in the blanks for themselves, and it's usually wrong, not accurate information.
Oh, right, and blaming themselves for the most part.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's say, you're in the work of figuring this out. What have you seen in your work with helping moms through this, how they are able to get a better sense of themselves and feel a little bit better in their journey through motherhood?
In therapy, a lot of the work is about grieving and giving them that space to, again, once it clicks for them, because you have to, the first stage of grieving is denial, and that kind of once they're willing to see really this is what's going on, and giving them a space to feel angry about it and the way that things went for them and how that affected them, letting them feel sad about that, just giving them that space to have their feelings and validate them is huge. Then they're more empowered to do the work that they need to do as far as setting boundaries and analyzing the other relationships in their life and really focusing on recognizing that they can have a healthy relationship with their own children. They can change this story or break this pattern. It's very empowering.
Right. Yeah. It's so important, I think, what you said about the kind of taking the responsibility off of them, that it's not their fault, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so once someone is going through the process and putting these pieces together, you said it's very freeing for them, which is Yeah, I can really see that. What happens for them as they keep going?
As they get stronger and recognize, sometimes it's also not uncommon that perhaps they look back and see that they also have friends in their life who also may treat them in the same way or take advantage of them. And so they may have to go through a little housekeeping. And sometimes, unfortunately, in their own relationships, if they're married or have a partner, they may recognize some of those patterns. But once they kind of look at that and realize that, a lot of this is about how do we make meaning and take that empowerment and take it forward and say that making meaning doesn't always mean that there's a reason that this happened, but that giving them a space to define what this means to them and changing their narrative from I was unworthy of love or I'm screwed as a mom, my daughter's screwed as a child. Because of this experience and because now I've learned what I know, I can be an even better mom than I ever thought possible because of this experience and knowing what I know now and feeling good about breaking that cycle. So helping them build resilience and helping them recognize that learning these things now makes them less likely to repeat it in other relationships, have their children have these experiences with relationships and just value themselves more. It's so empowering.
Wow. Yeah, that is really a great and hopeful trajectory for this. And two, to kind of piggyback on what you were saying to break the cycle is that it's very, very possible and most likely that their own mother had either a difficult mother, a difficult father, a difficult life experience that set them up to interact the way that they do. And like breaking that cycle so you're not continuing to pass it down the line is really, really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to speak to what you just said about part of healing can also be doing some work on recognizing why your mom is the way that she is, because just like you said, she had her own wounds and it doesn't make her behavior okay. It doesn't mean you have to allow it. It just means that she's the way she is also because she didn't get what she needed. And that can help us find compassion. And again, doesn't mean that you won't have to set boundaries. In my own experience, I recognize my mom had a lot of traumatic events in her upbringing, that intergenerational transmission of trauma, and so she did not get her emotional needs met and was abused and had really unrealistic expectations put on her.
Right.
However, she also chose to not break the cycle and try to learn and do differently. And it's just not okay to continue putting yourself in that situation that's unhealthy.
Right. And thank you so much for adding this in. I think it's so important. And it makes me think of a conversation I just had with a client, which was essentially that since I can understand why this happened to my parent, aren't I supposed to still be the same with them? And to your point of like, yes, you can be compassionate and understanding, but that doesn't mean you have to keep submitting yourself to the kind of emotional abuse or, you don't have to keep taking it just because you understand it. And that is, I think, very challenging to grow through that.
Yeah, especially when you've been put in that role your whole life, that's your job. So it's definitely, again, like I said before, it kind of ebbs and flows. There will be times, or for some people, I see a mad rush in my schedule around the holidays, as you can probably imagine I'm sure every therapist does, but with this population about, well, my mom wants me to come over for Christmas and I don't know how to handle that. I don't really want to do it. How do I do that? And, again, we work out something that works for them. It's not me saying, well, just don't go. Right, and sometimes it is, but other times it's, well, could you let her know that your schedule only allows you to just come for dessert? Can you do that? Or can you have an exit strategy in place? Can you have a code word with your partner that he or she will know that it's time to go?
Yeah, right.
So coming up with something that they can feel good about while they're still feeling empowered. They didn't, they didn't say, I'm not going to go at all and celebrate Christmas with my family, but I'm going to take control over how long I subject myself to that.
Wow. Yeah, that's really, really important. And I'm hopeful that, people who are listening, whether you're, a mom going through this experience yourself or a therapist who's supporting moms like this, can really hear that the kind of arc of this healing process that you're describing, from recognizing it to sitting with it and grieving it, and then getting coping tools and skills and support onto resilience. I mean, you definitely can heal through this.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that it's empowering, really, to the moms who are listening.
Yeah, me too.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to share some tools that have been helpful for me in my practice and, personally as well, but for sure in my practice. But there are tools that you could use whether you are in this situation yourself or whether you're a helper who helps people in this situation. There's a couple of really good books that I really have found helpful for clients. One is called Will I Ever Be Good Enough? By Karyl McBride. And again, the subtitle is about narcissistic mothers with daughters, but the information in it could be used for different situations. So don't let that throw you off. It still could be a really helpful book. And then the other one is called Children of the Self-Absorbed by Nina Brown. I love these titles.
Yeah.
But they're the type of things that people see the cover and they're like, yes, I get it.
Yeah.
The other tool that can be very helpful for people is I have them write therapeutic letters saying the things that they wish they could say, because the odds are that having a conversation with the person in their life is just not realistic. It's not going to be received. It's going to end up, being flipped around and shut down. And so a therapeutic letter about what you wish you could say to your parent. And sometimes I have people write therapeutic letters to themselves as a child and give themselves what they didn't get and what they wish they could have gotten. Those can be very powerful tools. And then the fun thing is you get to do what you want after. Some people save them, some people rip them up or burn them, bury them, just whatever you want to do with that letter. And then the last tool that I thought was really fun, try to find something for everybody, because not everybody likes to read or has time to read. So I stumbled across this really great, it's like a podcast, but it's a YouTube channel. There's no video, it's all audio. So I'm not sure why it's on YouTube, but it is. So it's called The Little Shaman Healing. So SHAMAN. And they're brief little, 7 to 8 minute clips about ways to handle those difficult people in your life in general. So it's not just about mothers and daughters. So I love her style, and I know not everybody will, but she's very direct. She's very permissive and just really gets in there and educates and gives people concrete things to reassure themselves and be able to use in their own life.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for those resources. That's fantastic, right? Because there's so many different ways to learn and to heal. And I just appreciate that you are offering all of these to the listeners. And I absolutely appreciate your time and for talking about this topic. And I think it's so important and really valuable for a lot of the listeners, because our relationships are on a spectrum. So I think there's something in this for everybody, really. Like if you're even the friend who's supporting a new mom who's going through this, or you're a partner and your spouse is going through this, this is really important information to kind of understand the process of healing through this, and absolutely for the therapist listening as well. So I thank you so much for your time and for your expertise.
Oh, thanks for having me. I love it.
Thank you so much, Crystal, for coming on and sharing this really deep perspective on the transition to motherhood and ways that we can really think about how our own histories are impacting us. And again, to recap, Crystal mentioned a couple of resources, books, Will I Ever Be Good Enough? And Children of the Self-Absorbed, and a YouTube channel, The Little Shaman Healing. If you'd like to get connected with Crystal, you can find her at irisrepro.com, on Facebook, Iris Reproductive Mental Health Services, or Pregnancy and Postpartum Support Minnesota. And as usual, if this is your first time joining us on the Mom and Mind podcast, please do subscribe so you can get all of our episodes downloaded straight to your device, where you can pick and choose where to listen to any one of our more than 100 episodes. Come and connect with us in our Mom and Mind Connection Facebook group on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Thank you so much for being with us. Until next time. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please share this podcast. Together we can support moms and families so that no one has to deal with this alone. Come connect with us at momandmind.com.